Hi, it's Reeves again, your Lexus rep here at Boston College. Today we're going to go over statutes and regulations because you have another video assigned to you about what exactly is a statute and what exactly is a regulation and how they work together. Today I'm going to limit my video to secondary sources, using the secondary source to find statutes, and then how to use the statute to find the corresponding regs. For today's video, we are going to assume that you have been asked to research injection of water into wells under the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. You don't know very much about the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974 or even what injection of water is. So what you're going to want to do is start your research in secondary sources. If you go up to the red search bar, let's just type what you know. You know that you've been asked to research the Safe Drinking Water Act. Now, when we type in the Safe Drinking Water Act, you'll see that a number pop up. You are specifically told to research the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. So go ahead and put the year on and hit search. A little tip for you, when you add the year in the name of an act, it will pull up the exact statute and legislation. But what we want is a secondary source. So click View References to Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. This is going to pull up your traditional results list. You can see here that we are in secondary materials. As I reviewed in your class last week, the first thing that I like to do is narrow it down to treatises and jurisprudence. Because you have been tasked with specifically researching injection of water into wells, let's use the search within results list to further narrow your results. Let's try inject exclamation point within 5 words of well. Remember that by putting the exclamation point, that's a root expander, so it's going to look for inject, injecting, injects, and so forth. We get a number of sources to choose from. Because this one is titled About Water, I decided let's go ahead and check it out and see what's in it. What you might want to use is the table of contents to see if this source is on point for you. From here, you can search within the table of contents or just scroll through and see what's going on. This has to do with groundwater protection, and all of a sudden, you'll see in Part B, underground injection control. That's a new phrase that you did not know before starting your research. When you find a new phrase and you'd like to run a search, you can always highlight it and click Add to Search and run a search for that specific phrase. And from here, it's going to run a search and pull up all of the things that meet that specific search criteria. And you can see here, this is the source that we were looking at previously. Let's go ahead and jump into it. As I emphasized in your class, you want to use the footnotes to link you to primary sources of law. As you start going through here and reading, it's going to describe what exactly is underground injection control programs. And if you click on footnote 58, it's going to link you to the corresponding statute. So let's go ahead and jump into the statute here. In this statute, if you were to scroll down, you will see that in the last part, Part D, it defines what exactly is underground injection as well as underground injection endangerment of drinking water sources. We could certainly shepherdize this document to find all of the cases and secondary sources that have cited to it, but there's some other really helpful features here. If you use the jump to function, it's a very quick way to navigate through the statute. For example, we could go to the history. The history is going to tell you everything that has happened to this act. In the next section, you'll get the annotations. This is very comprehensive. It's going to tell you every time this act has changed and tell you what exactly it changed. So you can see in 2005, they actually changed what exactly underground injection means. Directly below this section, you get to the case notes. And the case notes are very helpful. They are not, however, a comprehensive list of all of the cases that have cited to the statute. It will be the main cases or the cases that are particularly unique. So if you wanted to jump to the definitions, for example, you click your little arrow and it will jump you down to the definition of what exactly is underground injection and find the corresponding cases that discuss this issue. However, directly below the case notes is something called the Research Reference and Practice Aids. This is a very underutilized section of the annotated version of the code that I strongly recommend when doing research for regulations. The very first thing that will always be listed at the top is the corresponding regulation. And the reason why I find this particularly helpful is if you were to start in regulations, which I will show you a little bit later on, it's not always clear which statute it corresponds with. And it's also very, very heavy lifting. So if you use the annotations, the research reference and practice aids here for the specific statute, it's going to link you to the section of the Code of Federal Regulation that you need. So you can see here that the UIC program requirements are found in 40 CFR 145.1. So let's go ahead and click on that. As you can see, this is the Code of Federal Regulation, and it's going to outline exactly what is this underground injection program. You can shepherdize a regulation, which we will practice in class on Wednesday. So what I want to do now is go over where exactly the statutes and legislative material live, as well as the administrative materials, in case you want to look directly for a regulation or directly for a statute without accessing it through the secondary sources. Here you can see we've ran a search for the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. We are currently in the secondary materials. However, you could have accessed the statutes and regs over here on the left-hand side. Once I get to the statute, the first thing I like to do is to really narrow it down to the code, because I want to limit it to just the materials that I would actually cite to in a case. I don't want to get pending legislation or bill text that wasn't actually passed into law. From here, you can further narrow down your sources. So for example, if you did want a U.S. Act, you could narrow it down to the U.S. federal materials. Similarly, you could have found the regs by going to administrative codes and regulations. Similar to a statute, the first thing I like to do is to narrow it down to just the code. You can see the 64 FR. The FR was the Federal Registry. That is where they have to give you notice, you being the public, that they are going to pass a regulation. Once it has actually been passed and it is officially law, it gets codified into the Code of Federal Regulation, which is right here, and it will show up in the administrative code filter. So how does administrative codes and regulations differ than administrative material? Similar to the fact that we have cases separated by statutes, the administrative agencies actually sort of have a mix of both judicial functions as well as lawmaking functions. The administrative materials include decisions that come out of administrative agencies. So you can see, for example, if we wanted it to narrow down to just materials coming out of the EPA, we could do that. Some agencies actually have the ability to oversee certain cases, and individuals have to exhaust all of their remedies within that administrative body before they are able to appeal into a traditional court. So again, administrative materials, they're similar to cases except for they are put out by agencies. Administrative codes, on the other hand, and regulations would include the actual CFR, the actual regulation, and it's sort of similar to a statute. Hopefully, your other videos will clarify the difference between statutes and regs and how they work together, but if you'd like additional clarification, please reach out to me or any of the librarians or, of course, Professor Blum. And that's all I've got for you. Thanks for listening.